You wouldn't believe how one incendiary outburst left a young leader tongue-tied, while another redefined the game. When passion and precision were brought together in a room full of cameras, the result wasn't merely political, it was personal. If you've ever wondered what truly wins in today's America, heart or strategy, this one's for you. In an argument hall, there are two voices that stood out, one honed with strategy, the other driven by passion. But when passion's fire meets icy calculations' chill, who really wins? Have we become too ready to reward performance rather than principle? And when the eyes of the world are upon your lips, can heart alone prevail? This is the tale of a hearing that became a fight, a leader who refused to yield, and a challenger who walked in boldly, but departed altered. Washington's congressional hearing room was heavy with tension, like a tautly stretched tightrope. That normal atmosphere of politeness clung in the room, but barely. Beneath it, a tempest of frustration and impending conflict. There wasn't a person in the room who could have anticipated what would happen next. Everyone's eyes were glued to the extended table, where the speeches were beginning to get passionate. What was supposed to be a typical government meeting, spirited for sure, now hung in the balance of something truly historic. Before we go on, take a quick minute to let us know where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a new story. Kash Patel towered over the podium, surrounded by spotlight. His soothing, assured presence dominated the space as if he already belonged there. Cameras snapped, reporters whispered. And Patel? He moved deliberately to adjust the mic stand, slow and steady like a musician ready to play their first note. The audience, largely comprised of Trump supporters, was silent, holding their breath. Across the room, Jasmine Crockett sat stiffly. Her hands lay poised on the table, but her eyes betrayed her. They flashed just enough to indicate she felt it coming. Then Patel started. His voice was low, velvety, but cutting as a razor. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, scanning the room before fixing his eyes on Crockett, "we're here to talk about the future, national security, the rule of law, and accountability. As head of the FBI, it's my duty to protect this country from threats, foreign and domestic." He paused, letting the gravity of his words settle, and then, with a slight nod of his head and a thin, knowing smile, he continued, "But I have to ask, are we all here really able to grasp the complexity of these things?" That one struck home. Whispered laughter rumbled through the Trump crowd. Several of Crockett's supporters clenched their fists, however, their composure starting to unravel. Patel pushed on, now allowing a bit of sarcasm creep into his tone. "Representative Crockett," Patel started, his voice even but patronizing, "I really am a fan of your energy. But tell me this, how can one who is most famously known for their tweets assist in framing the intricate decisions Congress makes regarding national security?" He put extra weight on the word social media, making them sound like a smear rather than a skill. The room responded with louder laughter this time, cruel and sharp, like a knife digging deeper. Crockett took a steadying breath. She stood, her posture firm, though her voice carried a subtle strain beneath its clarity. "Mr. Patel," she said, "I'm not here for show. I'm here to stand for the people of Texas, the ones who had faith in me with their vote. Yes, I've exercised my voice on social media, but I'm also an attorney. I've stood before courtrooms advocating for people who had nobody else. I know the law, and I'm here to ensure it is enforced fairly on all people." She spoke from the heart. Her words rang true, but they lacked the acuity to completely deflect Patel's attack. A handful of heads nodded in agreement, but more stood back, eyes on Patel, waiting for him to continue. And continue he did. Patel gave a quiet smile. Not smug, but the kind of smile that comes from knowing you've cornered your opponent. He leaned in slightly, hands braced on the podium, his voice turning colder and more direct. "A lawyer," he repeated, allowing the word to hang there for a beat, like it wasn't as much as she suspected. Yes, Representative, but serving as a public defender is one thing. Drafting national security policy? That's a different battlefield altogether. He waited, long enough for the silence to become palpable. Are you certain your experience in the courtroom has equipped you to deal with the sort of threats the FBI faces every single day? Then the jab. Tenderly spoken, but biting in effect. Or is your actual strength in evoking emotion on the internet, where a hashtag can mask a lack of understanding? The room exploded. Trump fans applauded and laughed. Conservative journalists frantically typed, hoping to get down every punchy quote. On social media, a tweet zipped across Twitter. Kash Patel just roasted Crockett. Crockett stood firm, attempting to maintain her ground. But her fingers tightened further, and her gaze swept the room, not in search of applause, but of reassurance. What she instead encountered were icy stares, empty faces, or worse, barely concealed curiosity. One of her fellow representatives, a humble ally, shook their head softly from the other side of the room. A silent cue. Adapt your strategy. Crockett stood up once more, but this time with a new fire in her belly. Her voice was now charged with urgency. Mr. Patel, Crockett started firmly, I'm not here to play hashtag games. I'm here to fight for those the system tends to forget. Same folks your FBI appears to ignore. I've witnessed how law can be used as a tool to hurt people in the wrong hands, and I will not quietly watch you make it a political tool. Her words struck with force, and for an instant, the room froze. But the accusatory manner in which she'd pointed to you betrayed something beneath, the frustration rising up, and Patel recognized it in an instant. He inclined his head slightly, as if he were doubting her, but the answer came hard and biting under its placid exterior. Sentiment, Representative Crockett, he continued, is what tends to divert people from truth. We're not here to trade in moving anecdotes. We're here to work with facts and reason. Then came the flip, deliberate and crisp. If we're discussing bending the law, perhaps we should examine your public pronouncements. You've referred to law enforcement agencies as being hostile. So let me ask you, how can we trust someone with that attitude to administer the FBI? He paused with those words, then looked straight into the camera, as if he wasn't speaking to Crockett anymore, but to the millions sitting in their homes. Crockett slowly sat down. Her expression was calm, but her eyes showed a hint of nervousness. One of her aides bent close, speaking softly to her. She nodded briefly in reply, trying her best to compose herself. As for Patel, he remained steadfast at the podium, casually swiping his suit sleeve, as if dusting off an effortless win. And then, with a polite cough, holding back just long enough to regain everyone's attention. Representative Crockett, he said, voice warm on the surface, but shot through with that same quiet condescension. Since you consider yourself a champion of justice, let's put that to work. He arched an eyebrow slightly. Can you clarify the import of the Supreme Court decision in Youngstown Sheet and Tube Company versus Sawyer, particularly where executive power and today's national security decisions are concerned? The question hit home, like a solid punch. It was complicated, a deep constitutional cut intended to reveal any weaknesses in her armor. The Youngstown case of 1952 was not run-of-the-mill material. It was thick, technical constitutional law, a minefield even for legal experts, and the ideal setup for Patel. Across the room, Crockett's eyes squinted. She rose again, bracing herself with her hands on the table. Her stance was firm, but there was a hesitation, a flicker of pause, as her mind struggled to dig up the details hidden in memory. Mr. Patel, Crockett started, her tone measured but guarded. The Youngstown case was about curbing presidential power. When President Truman attempted to seize steel mills during the Korean War, the Supreme Court told him he overstepped. His actions weren't supported by Congress or the Constitution. She was correct, and her response indicated as much. But it scratched the surface only. It ignored the underlying layers that established the case as a pillar of constitutional law. A few nodded politely in the crowd, but among the MAGA faithful there were stifled smiles. They sensed vulnerability. Patel did not flinch. He leaned forward slightly, a mask of courtesy spreading across his face, though one that was clearly artificial. "Not bad, Representative," he said, as if humoring a student with a decent first try. "But you've only skimmed the surface." He straightened his shoulders, locking eyes with her. Youngstown created a three-pronged test for deciding executive authority, Justice Jackson's concurrence, if you will. Now, can you tell me how that model applies to the FBI's existing counterterrorism activities? He stopped, then added with a sugar-coated bite, "Or is that a little outside your grasp?" The audience broke into soft laughter. The question wasn't just tough, it was tactical. It required more than book knowledge. It demanded the skill to link past precedent with the modern realities of national security. And that's where Patel knew he had the advantage. Crockett opened her mouth, then paused, her thoughts racing. She glanced at her notes, just a flick of the eyes, but the cameras caught it, magnifying. "Well," she started, but her confidence had wavered a bit. "The framework, it's checks and balances, ensuring the executive branch doesn't get too powerful. With the FBI, that would translate to operations needing to be under congressional oversight." Her sentences faded away. Not incorrect, but not accurate either. It was vague. Vaguer than that, even. The room responded accordingly. A hushed murmur spread, like disappointment eddying through the crowds. A red-hatted man shook his head and grumbled to his companion. Patel did not retreat. His tone remained level, but there was a cutting edge underneath, like a sword sheathed in velvet. "Checks and balances," he said again, his voice nearly teasing now. Catchy slogan. But that's not an answer. He shifted his posture and went on, his tone smooth and incisive. "Let me assist you, Representative. The Youngstown model breaks down presidential action into 3 zones. Zone 1. When the president acts with congressional approval, he has the most authority. Zone 2. The twilight zone, where Congress has not said yes or no, and the president must have a solid explanation. Zone 3, Patel went on, his voice firm, is when the president acts in opposition to Congress. That's where their power is the weakest." He waited for only a beat, allowing the import of the moment to settle. "So, Representative," he said, his eyes locking onto hers once more, "can you now tell us how that relates to our counterterrorism efforts? Or do we take it you know law only up to catchy slogans?" The room erupted. Applause shook the chamber, cameras blinding, fingers clacking across keyboards. Social media flared in seconds. Patel schools Crockett. Brutal demolition job. She wasn't prepared. On the other side of the table, Crockett bunched her fists on the floor beneath the desk. Her demeanor was fraying. Yet she stood once more, taller it seemed, as if willing herself not to shatter. "Mr. Patel," she continued, her voice lacing with irritation, "I'm not here to play trivia about the law. I'm here to ensure the FBI works for every American, not just the influential. Youngstown isn't about structures. It's about defending democracy. And that's what I battle every day." There was passion in her voice. Fire. But her words fell short. They didn't come close to the depth of Patel's question. They didn't challenge the details. A handful of her liberal supporters applauded, half-hearted, uncertain, but the majority of the room remained silent, anticipating what they knew was imminent. Patel didn't hurry. He just smiled, cool, calm, and spoke his next line like a chess player issuing checkmate. "Democracy," he said again, as if savoring the word. "Noble cause, Representative, but noble causes don't do national security. Knowledge does, strategy does, and for Pete's sake, Your failure to explain a simple principle of law is a serious question mark regarding your qualifications for this committee." Then he turned to the camera, his tone calm as if speaking directly to the nation. "The American people are owed leaders who get the complexity of the law, not ones who brandish the banner of justice for convenience's sake." Once more the audience exploded, this time even more loudly. MAGA fans stood and applauded. Phones vibrated with new headlines. One reporter's tweet tore across screens. "Patel just put Crockett in the grave with one question. Game over." Crockett took a seat. Her fists stayed firm, a covert attempt to keep them from shaking. Her supporters around her looked on, some concerned, one muttering to her in a hurry, but the harm had been done. Their backing, though genuine, could not compete with the hurricane that Patel had unleashed. The American people are owed leaders who get the complexity of the law, not ones who brandish the banner of justice for convenience's sake. Once more, the audience exploded, this time even more loudly. MAGA fans stood and applauded. Phones vibrated with new headlines. One reporter's tweet tore across screens. "Patel just put Crockett in the grave with one question. Game over." Crockett took a seat. Her fists stayed firm, a covert attempt to keep them from shaking. Her supporters around her looked on, some concerned, one muttering to her in a hurry, but the harm had been done. Their backing, though genuine, could not compete with the hurricane that Patel had unleashed. Within, Crockett was twirling. She had arrived at this hearing prepared, but nothing could prepare her for this. Patel wasn't merely arguing with her. He was taking her apart, methodically, calmly, in public. The cameras zoomed in, capturing it all, her previously firm conviction beginning to shatter. Online, mockery was already in the making. Crockett had entered this thinking she could take on Patel, but now it was evident. Patel wasn't merely in charge, he owned the room. Patel twisted his tie, a tiny movement, but victory screamed. He was poised, eyes sweeping the room like a maestro rehearsing the next movement in a performance he was playing perfectly. He wasn't finished, not by a long shot. He'd revealed what he perceived as Crockett's vulnerability on the law. Next, he was going deeper. The atmosphere in the room changed. Hands were leaned forward. It was coming. The tension was as heavy as velvet. Across the aisle, a conservative staffer leaned over to a friend and murmured, "She's finished. Kash owns the room." When the applause at last began to subside, Patel faced Crockett again. His smile was no longer merely sure, but taut, like a blade edged slowly from its scabbard. "Representative," he started, his voice low but imbued with a menacing promise, "let's proceed to a topic closer to your own history. Perhaps you can shed some light on your career as an attorney, and the cases you did or did not accept." The words hung in the air like bait. The room fell quiet. This was not a question. It was a trap, set with precision, and Crockett knew it. Her heart dropped. She could feel the weight of what was yet to come, the next blast of Patel's relentless barrage. The hearing room no longer felt like a room. It felt like a stage. The lights pounded down, the crowd held its breath, and Kash Patel stood composed at the podium waiting to strike again, this time not at her knowledge, but at her very integrity. He leaned in close, voice as smooth as ice. "Representative Crockett," he charged, a feigned polite tone veneer on his words, "I do appreciate your zeal to defend the voiceless. However, permit me to pose a question. When you decided to stand with those who stood accused of theft, violence, such felonies, was that really about justice? Or was it just an attempt to get attention?" Gasps and murmurs ran through the room. Patel's supporters nodded, as if he'd just spoken something they'd always known but never dared to say. It was a nasty question, couched in insincere curiosity, and directed squarely at her job as a public defender. Crockett rose slowly, working hard to level her eyes at him. Her calm was tenuous, but she found a strength within her that was deeper. "Mr. Patel," she told him, her tone commanding and shot through with determination. "As a public defender, I defended people who had no one. I did not choose the easy cases. I chose the difficult ones. I fought to ensure that every individual, whether wealthy or not, received the equal justice our Constitution guarantees. I didn't do it for publicity. I did it because justice should never hinge on your bank balance." There was a flutter in the room, a tug at the heart, though weak. But at Patel's camp there was still stoicism, their faces impenetrable, their expectation far from spent. "That's real justice," Crockett exclaimed, her tone full of fervor. "Not some publicity stunt." Her words were heartfelt, but it was precisely that passion that betrayed the tension she was feeling. The room sensed it. Some of the Democratic supporters produced half-hearted applause, but it was drowned out by the wave of subdued giggles from Patel's team. Patel navigated as if in full possession of himself. He leaned to one side, the pose of a teacher patiently correcting an over-eager but mistaken student. "True justice," he said, his voice as smooth as silk over a knife. "Great feeling, Representative. But let's talk in terms of facts." He allowed the silence to linger, then plunged in for the kill. "In 2018, he started, voice silky, you defended a man in a Texas domestic violence case. Per court records, he reoffended within days of being released. So tell us, did your ruling deliver justice that day, or place your community at risk?" The punch was thrown with precision. The breath was drawn from the room. This was not an attack. This was a trap she had no option to refuse. He had studied her history, timed the assault, and now he stood there, letting the silence weigh upon her. Crockett breathed, willed herself to look at him. "Mr. Patel," she replied tightly but still upright, "each case I accepted was about upholding the constitutional right to a fair trial. I didn't dictate what happened after. But I do think every individual deserves their day in court. That's what our system is based on. The response was truthful, ethical, but in this chamber, this battlefield, it did not hit with the authority she required. Her honesty collided with a brick of doubt. Whispers engulfed the room. Then one MAGA voter made the comment audible enough to be heard. "She's standing up for criminals." And Patel smiled. It was the sort of smile that did not reach the eyes, cold, calculative, and razor-sharp. "Principles," he said, rolling the word around his tongue with a touch of derision. "Representative, principles don't shield the mothers, fathers, and children who are harmed when we make these choices wrong. When I was a federal prosecutor, I prioritized community safety. You, apparently, prioritized idealism over reality." Then he turned, slowly, deliberately, toward the camera, allowing the camera to savor every word. "I wonder," he did say, the volume softer now, near whispering, "do your voters understand that you elected to stand with the ones who put them in harm's way, rather than the ones who were supposed to be protected?" The room exploded. Applause. Cheers. The crowd surged, MAGA fans standing on their feet in applause. And Crockett? She settled into her seat, her fists bunched in her lap, fighting not to shake. Her gaze swept the room, searching for allies, seeing only cameras, her heart racing. The hearing was far from finished, but Patel had just gained the initiative and set down his marker. She prepared to answer, to grab back at least a sliver of ground. But Patel held up his hand. A little gesture. Peaceful, controlled, but it stilled her like a gavel. "Representative," he said, his voice that of an experienced surgeon poised to make the next careful cut, "I have no doubt as to your good intentions, but good intentions will not suffice to steer this country through the dangers we face." He allowed the silence to breathe. "The American people are looking for leaders who will put their safety ahead of ideals." He delivered the line not with aggression, but with chilling finality. His voice was the sound of judgment cloaked in civility. Another wave of applause erupted, louder this time. A few in the crowd rose to their feet, chanting his name. Patel! Patel! On social media, the firestorm grew. Patel just ended her. She came with slogans. He brought facts. Crockett's done. Across the table, Crockett remained still. Her head was bent slightly. Her fists were clenched so tightly that her knuckles paled. Next to her, a Democratic member reached over, resting his hand on her shoulder, a silent display of support, but his worry in his eyes was evident. Even her friends understood the tide had turned, and not in her direction. Inside, Crockett's mind reeled. She had arrived ready to argue. But Patel wasn't arguing. He was dismantling, diplomatically, in public, mercilessly. While all this was going on, Patel stood tall, his posture immaculate. His suit creased free, his face inscrutable but confident. He was the kind of man who seemed to have already won. And yet he wasn't done. He'd broken her legal expertise. He'd cut down her career. Now he was about to shatter her public credibility. The next punch was personal, calculated, and deadly. He leaned slightly, glancing around the room like a commander sizing up his terrain. Then, eyes fixed on Crockett, he began to speak. Hushed, but so filled with power that it vibrated in every part of the room. "Representative," he stated, voice full of foreboding tranquility. "Is it time we took a closer look at your public remarks, especially those you've made about private enterprise and innovation, concerns determining this nation's future?" The room leaned forward. Everyone anticipated what followed. Her posts, her shots at Elon Musk, her open contempt for cryptocurrency, her characterization of Dogecoin as a scam for the tech elite. It had all been on the record, and now it would be wielded like a knife. Patel caught his breath, not because he required it, but because the timing called for dramatic flair. "Tell us," he went on, "how denouncing a premier innovator like Mr. Musk, someone who is hiring tens of thousands of Americans and leading the way in space, AI, and energy innovation, how does that fit your vision of progress?" It was not a question. It was a spotlight on her mistakes. And under that spotlight, the next part of the takedown was set to go. Her voice resounded in the chamber, strong but crackling, her determination struggling to emerge from the gale Patel had whipped up. "I fight for working families, for struggling individuals, not for billionaires like Elon Musk." The instant was weighted, until it exploded. Laughter, sarcasm, applause. MAGA supporters pounced on her remark like hounds on the scent of blood. A gallery denizen yelled, "Yeah? And how's that going for you?" Another taunted, "Keep losing, lady." Social media went nuts. "Crockett just called Elon a scam. Is she trying to lose Texas? Kash letting her hang herself." Even some of her supporters squirmed. The swipe might have been justified in her head, but politically, it was desperate. And Patel? He didn't bat an eye, didn't crack a smile. He just sat there staring at her like a lion watching prey that was too tired to run. "Thank you," he said at last, the words nearly fond, as if he were thanking her for the gift of self-destruction. "Representative," he went on, taking a small step forward, tone cool and measured, "you just informed millions of Americans, those who work in SpaceX factories, those who are enjoying AI and clean energy jobs, that their future doesn't count because of your distaste for one man." He nodded toward the gallery where a cluster of veterans remained, mute and observant. "And yet your own record indicates that you voted against bipartisan technology funding that would have created high-paying jobs within your district. So I ask, is it justice to withhold opportunity solely because it's from someone with whom you disagree?" A moment. "Or is that political retribution masquerading as principle?" There was silence. Crockett stood frozen. No notes, no political allies to cling to, only the harsh lens of the camera recording each blink, each struggling breath. Patel swung around to the audience, his words rising to righteous solemnity. This country isn't advanced by pettiness, it's elevated by courage, by those who will work with anybody, even opponents, to make life better for ordinary Americans. That's not ideology, that's leadership. There was a tidal wave of applause. Even centrists in attendance nodded. Crockett returned to her seat, her fire lost. Her hands clenched on the table edge, not with anger now, but terror. For in that instant she understood. She hadn't merely lost the argument, she was losing the room. And Patel? He hadn't even worked up a sweat. The crowd reacted in kind. Cheers boomed, surging in a wave that engulfed Crockett's presence whole. Her face skidded. The little authority she'd regained dissolved in the face of Patel's refusal to flinch and his unyielding rationality. Reaction videos across the internet went wild. Patel just schooled her on policy. She's screaming. He's in charge. Aber cash crushes. It began trending in minutes. Crockett gasped hard, attempting to recover, but Patel was just getting going. He edged closer to the mic, his voice silken, but only in tone, not purpose. His next hit was precision-engineered with surgical accuracy, designed to discredit not just Crockett's policies, but also redefine her whole agenda. "Representative Crockett," he started, his tone the epitome of civility. "No one questions your enthusiasm. But enthusiasm without purpose becomes chaos. Americans are fed up with slogans. They seek solutions. And when you label game-changing reforms as scams, without presenting viable alternatives, you don't serve the downtrodden. You leave them behind. You speak for the unheard? Then why is it their voices cheer for progress while yours calls it betrayal?" Gasps. Clapping. A man rose to his feet, applauding and shouting, "That's leadership!" Crockett's jaw clenched. Her expression was calm, but her eyes gave away the truth. Panic, humiliation, defeat. Even her most loyal supporters sat in silence, their faces etched with concern. The same silence stretched across the internet, where Democratic influencers shrank from weighing in, not knowing how to spin what had become a one-sided drubbing. Patel relaxed a fraction, his hands folded calmly on the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen," he told the room now, not simply Crockett. "This moment is not about me. It's about whether we will stick with failed systems out of fear or rise with bold solutions regardless of who brings them. That's the choice. That's the fight." And in an instant, he made the whole exchange a rallying cry. The chamber erupted. Cheers, applause. Even moderates stood. Jasmine Crockett remained seated, stunned. She had entered a debate. Kash Patel had staged a political killing. The hearing room was alive like a stadium following a championship knockout. The clapping had stopped, but the charge remained, tense, crackling, electric. Even some reporters who were known to be neutral shared a look, one whispering, "That was brutal." Crockett sat still, immobile. The responsibility of millions watching, tweeting, analyzing every stutter and blunder now weighed on her like an avalanche. Her hands, once hardened by resolve, now shook in her lap. But even under the darkness of humiliation, something flared, a muttering stir from the back, tense young aides nervously whispering, Democratic staff fidgeting uncomfortably, and then softly leaned in her senior advisor. "Still got the mic. Don't let him finish your story." For a moment, there was silence. Then Jasmine Crockett rose slowly from her seat, not with defiance as she once had, or with the confidence she had lost, but with something else, the subdued grit of one who had been knocked, jeered at, pushed to a corner, and still stood up. "Mr. Patel," she started, this time without shaking, "you are right. Passion does not construct bridges, but neither does cruelty." The room fell silent. "You claim the American people want answers. I do too. But leadership requires saying what we know is true even if it's unpopular. It requires standing up for those who don't have billion-dollar PR machines behind them. It requires recognizing that making government more efficient can't happen on the backs of hungry children or closing rural hospitals. Her voice came stronger, clearer, and gradually, even the right-wing audience started to attend, their faces not in agreement but in acknowledgement that she was still here. I might have slipped. I might not have won your admiration today. But I didn't get here for cheers. I came here because this nation is being torn in two. And I still think that advocating for the powerless is not a flaw. It's the very essence of American strength. The room did not burst, but it didn't laugh either. A handful of Democrats applauded gently. Even some moderates nodded, ever so slightly. The tide had not turned, but she had halted the bleeding. Patel arched an eyebrow, impressed but unswayed. He adjusted his jacket and leaned forward. "Sincere comeback," he said coolly. "But in Washington, words don't cost much. Results are what count." Crockett gazed at him, exhausted but unblinking. "Then I suppose I'll just have to demonstrate it. In the next vote, the next bill, the next election." And with that, the session adjourned, not in victory, but in two futures drawn starkly apart. Patel had won the fight, but Crockett had not disappeared. A hush of reverence settled in the chamber, one that rarely accompanied political spectacle. It wasn't just applause now, it was belief, conviction, the kind that made headlines and shifted polls. Patel wasn't merely delivering a speech, he was cementing an image, a warrior of law and order, reason over outrage, clarity over noise. "While I am president," he went on, voice unflappable, "we will eliminate corruption wherever it exists. We will never apologize for defending our borders. We will never waver in confronting those who seek to destroy our peace, whether foreign foes or domestic decay." The MAGA crowd applauded once more, this time not only with clapping, but with chants. "Patel! Patel! Patel!" Crockett watched, still sitting. She didn't blink, she didn't shift, but her silence this time was not defiance, it was survival. Her team behind her were frozen, each of them attempting to do damage control in real time. On social media, reactions detonated. Conservative influencers referred to it as a masterclass in leadership. Fox's Chiron flashed. Patel delivers vision, while Crockett flounders. Even moderate anchors employed terms such as commanding and surgical. But beneath the pomp, something deeper churned. Patel understood this was not just about this particular hearing, or even this particular opponent. This was the launching pad. He was no longer merely a Trump-era staffer or a loyalist bearing the former president's flame. With that speech, that posture, that shivering calm in disassembling a left-of-center foe, he became a contender. "We will defend freedom by protecting order," he finished. "We will not step back into anarchy. We will lead." And then he backed away from the mic, not smirking, not swaggering, but with the calculating exactness of a man who had just taken one step closer to the White House. The session was adjourned, but the campaign had started. As Crockett was led out of the room, cameras tracked each step, her face empty, her strength depleted, her silence piercing. The picture of her leaving, shoulders slumped, head downed, would be looped constantly on cable news and social media. Fox's Chiron flashed. Patel delivers vision while Crockett flounders. Even moderate anchors employed terms such as commanding and surgical. But beneath the pomp, something deeper churned. Patel understood this was not just about this particular hearing, or even this particular opponent. This was the launching pad. He was no longer merely a Trump-era staffer or a loyalist bearing the former president's flame. With that speech, that posture, that shivering calm in disassembling a left-of-center foe, he became a contender. "We will defend freedom by protecting order," he finished. "We will not step back into anarchy. We will lead." And then he backed away from the mic, not smirking, not swaggering, but with the calculating exactness of a man who had just taken one step closer to the White House. The session was adjourned, But the campaign had started. As Crockett was led out of the room, cameras tracked each step, her face empty, her strength depleted, her silence piercing. The picture of her leaving, shoulders slumped, head downed, would be looped constantly on cable news and social media. MSNBC attempted to put a gentle spin on it. It was a tough night for Representative Crockett, but she remained true to her values. Fox News was not so kind. Crockett melts under Patel's questioning. This is leadership contrast in HD. Democratic strategists were scrambling in back rooms throughout Washington. One aide slammed shut his notepad. She walked into an ambush carrying a flashlight and still managed to fall in. We should have worked her up more on Patel's background. Another grumbled, "He didn't just defeat her. He disassembled her and made it appear as justice." Patel's war room was a different world altogether. Dozens of aides stood packed around monitors as aftershocks played out in the media. Tweets flooded in. That wasn't a hearing. That was a coronation. Patel for VP? No. 2028. Kash Patel slipped in unobtrusively, but the room erupted into spontaneous applause. He held up a hand, humble but firm. "We don't celebrate victories," he said icily. "We work on the next one." Then, addressing his media advisor, he asked one thing. "Clip the last 2 minutes. Clean sound. Put subtitles on. Get trending in 30. Outside the Capitol building, right-wing supporters waited like fans outside an arena, waving phones, already replaying his last words. "We cannot let those who are short of vision govern this country." Patel had reformed the moment into a campaign, a movement, a message. In her office again, Crockett sat alone. The lights were low. A staffer stood quietly at the door, unsure if she should give encouragement or room. On her desk, an unsaved draft of a press release lay untouched, but Crockett wasn't reading it. She was staring at the TV replaying Patel's speech, and somewhere in her eyes, something flickered. Not defeat, not yet. Something colder. Resolve. As night fell over D.C., the Capitol dome glowed against the darkening sky, but inside both camps the aftermath had only begun. In Patel's private suite, the mood was electric. Strategists crowded around screens analyzing viral engagement. "We're trending top 3 globally," one aide said, scrolling through charts. "Fox News is declaring it a masterclass in dominance. Even CNN can't deny it. They're having a panel called, 'Did Patel Redefine Political Combat?'" Kash Patel was calm. Dressed casually now in a black blazer, he took a drink from a water bottle, his gaze on the screen displaying Crockett's bowed departure. "Turn up the volume," he said. He stood silently as her shape moved through the doors of the chamber, alone and defeated. "Set that up for a shot," he instructed softly. "We will use it in the commercial." Downtown, in Jasmine Crockett's office, the lights were low except for the cold light of her laptop. The progressive strategist sat opposite to her. "We have to change the story now, Jasmine. This was not a loss. This was an ambush. You went into a setup, not a debate." Crockett shook her head. "But I went into it." She finally opened her phone. Thousands of mentions, footage of her mistakes. One meme that read, "When you bring a speech to a war." She looked at her aide. "I'm not finished, but I can't battle him on his turf." "Then we change the landscape," the aide said. "We take this online, grassroots documentary format. You outlasted Patel. Let's remind people why you are still relevant." Meanwhile, political trenches deepened. Conservative pundits characterized the moment as a watershed. Patel is the right's Obama moment. Charisma plus command. That's 2028 right there. Progressive pundits mobilized in protest. "Don't let this be the end of Jasmine. Let it be the start of laying bare how style is beginning to trump substance in American politics." But in the middle, among independents and swing voters, there was doubt. A commentator on a centrist podcast asked a genuine question. Sure, Patel won the room, but did he win the country, or did we just cheer for the loudest voice again? Back inside her now empty office, Jasmine closed her laptop and whispered into the silence. They want a fight? I'll give them a reckoning. The next morning, Capitol Hill awoke to a storm, not of weather but of narrative. Op-eds, memes, live streams, and debates dominated the airwaves. Cable news networks reran the footage over and over. Crockett's fall, Patel's accuracy, the America First chants. But something unusual began to churn beneath the din. A new voice emerging, not Patel, not Crockett, but the American public themselves. In Crockett's home state of Texas, small protests were organized, grassroots, passionate, resolute. A young mother addressed a local news team. Crockett might have lost a hearing, but she spoke for us. We don't need polished takedowns. We need someone who sees us. A former union worker weighed in. They mocked her emotion. When did feeling something for the people become a weakness? The hashtag #FeelSomething began trending, employed by supporters as a rebuke to the cold calculation that had characterized Patel's moment. At the same time, in Florida, in a high-rise office close to Mar-a-Lago, Patel sat down with Trump's top strategists. A digital strategist had run polling surges. Independents responded positively, but younger voters, mixed. They're conflicted between strength and empathy. Patel leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. Then we provide them both, strength with compassion. Next speech, I begin with unity. Then I eviscerate the narrative. Trump strode in, applauding. That's the spirit. You didn't just take down Crockett, Kash. You auditioned for the future. In Washington, behind MSNBC's primetime desk, producers agonized over segment order. Lead with Crockett's collapse or Patel's ascension. Neither, one proposed. Lead with what it all means for 2028. The battle lines are being drawn. On the internet, the discussion ran deeper. Conservatives celebrated Patel as the epitome of a post-Trump republicanism, unified, piercing, camera-savvy. Progressives feared a chilling trend, emotional repression for political theatrics. Centrists asked new questions. Do we want leaders who win moments or leaders who build futures? And amidst the din, Crockett subtly filmed a video in her office. No makeup, no podium, just her phone. She gazed into the camera, exposed yet unyielding. You watched a woman lose a moment, but you haven't seen her rise from it. I'm still here, still fighting, and I won't be the last woman told to quiet her voice just because it made them uncomfortable. She finished with a gentle smile and one sentence. This isn't over. Not for me. Not for the people I speak for. She clicked post. The views began to climb. Patel, with cutting-edge aplomb and tenacious research, uncovering everything from Crockett's archived defense files to her neglected social media. She put out a tsunami of legal challenges, Youngstown sheet and tube, executive excess, bureaucratic excess. It wasn't strategy alone. It was a masterclass in taking down an adversary. Crockett, while passionate and kind, allowed her feelings to dictate the situation. She was imprecise in her replies. Her passion, a former asset, became weakness. And one misstep, incorrectly addressing Patel as lady, became a meme viewed by millions. The #sign Crockett Down hashtag went viral across all platforms, a merciless reminder of how a single moment can undo years of work. Because in modern America, social media doesn't only mirror public opinion, it forges it. And when the cameras are always rolling, preparation and composure are no luxuries, they're survival skills. The takeaway? Whether you're in a boardroom, a courtroom, or a comment section, study your opposition, control your tone. Lead with facts, then add the fire. From Patel, we learned how calm mastery can overcome even the most resistance. From Crockett, we learned that passion is important, but without a plan, it quickly burns out. In a culture that tests your character in real time, achievement belongs to the people who can stand the line when the pressure comes.